Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the East Brandywine Township Board of Supervisors, Thursday, October 6, 2022, 8 a.m. meeting. A reminder that a recording device will be used during this meeting. I'm going to open it up with public comment for agenda items. Rules for conduct of public meetings established by Resolution 2001-08. The time allotted to each individual making a comment shall be 3 minutes unless otherwise set by the presiding officer. Additional public comment may be granted at the discretion of the presiding officer at the conclusion of the meeting. So I'll open it up for public comment on agenda items. Seeing none, we'll move on. We'll open up the minutes of previous meetings, Board of Supervisors, minutes September 15th, 2022.
I move we accept the minutes from the September 15th, 2022 meeting.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and do I have an authorization to pay bills? Did you guys have a minute to go over that in the payroll?
Yes.
I move that we authorize the payment of the bills and approve the payroll.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Luke, I don't think we have any old business or reports, so I guess we'll turn it over to the first agenda item, the pet sitting business new definition proposal, and that is with Gina DeMarco. She's, yep, there you are.
Morning.
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 So I'm just revisiting why I was here back in, I guess it was the winter, and I don't remember dates, I'm sorry. And I proposed to, I proposed a pet sitting ordinance rather than to be declared a kennel for no more than 10 dogs. And I was told, was told that we would minimize the ordinance because it was just a sample that I provided, just to shrink it to R2, and to kind of revisit it in 6 months. And I called back and I guess was told it's a no-go, so I'm just here again.
So just a reminder for everybody, this particular, we do have areas that are zoned. Luke, you'd probably be better to speak to this, but we have areas that are zoned currently right now for kennels. We have, I think, 1 or 2 kennels in the township.
So again, let me make sure I got the cameras pointing in the right direction. Okay, very good. Kennels are allowed in every zone. The definition of a kennel exists in the definition section of the of our zoning code. You are allowed to, let's talk about like a homeowner can have up to 4 dogs, but no more. The keeping for commercial purposes of more than 4 dogs in any zone in East Brandywine Township is considered a kennel. And kennels are allowed in all zones so long as they meet certain criteria, including setback, minimum lot size, and other provisions in the code. What Ms. DeMarco is proposing is essentially a third class of not a homeowner with dogs, but not a kennel, which is would have less stringent restrictions on lot size and other factors. So like a new classification of use, which is pet sitting business. I've had conversations with Gina, and Gina has presented before the Ordinance Task Force at the board's direction. The Ordinance Task Force is interested in considering allowing pet sitting businesses as a no-impact home occupation, but that would be the same number of dogs that would be allowed for non-commercial purposes. So if you're allowed to have 4 pet dogs, the Ordinance Task Force would consider amending the code to allow you to have up to 4 dogs that you were pet sitting for as part of a business, because it would have no additional adverse impact on the neighborhood. And that they were interested in amending the ordinance to allow that. But the Ordinance Task Force was not interested in creating a new classification for pet sitting business that was somewhere between a kennel, somewhere less restrictive than a kennel.
All right, so just to back up a little bit, kennels are allowed in the district provided, do we have this section on, do you happen to have that section?
I can bring it up.
Less than 15 acres.
Oh, it's fit,
I'm pretty sure that's it. And this isn't, I just want to provide to my existing clients. I don't want to advertise publicly. I don't want to take anybody new on. It's just an alternative to a kennel.
Okay, so when we're talking, we'll start with the first thing. This is the definition. A kennel is a place for the keeping, breeding, and/or boarding of more than 4 dogs for commercial purposes. So that's the first bit. That's the definition of a kennel. Okay, so kennel shall be permitted only when in compliance with the following standards. So let me also cue this up for the video. The lot shall have a gross area not less than 15 acres. Any area in which dogs are kept, sheltered, or exercised shall be located not less than 500 feet from any property line. There shall be sufficient facilities to enable the dogs to be sheltered indoors. I'm paraphrasing now. Sound baffling devices or other appropriate noise control measures shall be installed in or on any building or shelter housing dogs. There's a fencing requirement. So in this instance, compliance with the setback and the minimum lot area is not possible for the 2 parcels that you own on Zen Road.
Yes.
Yeah, and so your proposal is to create another class of that's pet sitting business that has some number. You're proposing what would be so.
It's just
So
it's
kennels would pick up our kennel definition would start at 11, and the pet sitting business would exist in the range between 5 and 10.
Yes,
Okay.
including foster as well.
Okay.
and you were talking about a certain set time frame, I believe, for yours, like business hours, pickup, drop, or were you talking about I can't remember all the details of what you were originally.
It would be just providing overnight care for my existing clients rather than me going to care for them at home. Because obviously I can't stay at somebody's house, and it's very hard to find people you actually trust that you hire to stay at people's homes. But I would no earlier than 8 a.m. People could drop off, and no later than 7 p.m. that they could pick up or drop off. Which I have my own dogs in before 10 at night. And I always scheduled pickups and drop-offs. Everything's scheduled like an appointment. So it wouldn't just be, and I don't want my family lives there. I don't want to advertise publicly. I want it to be people I know and trust, and I've been in their homes, and we have a relationship.
And full disclosure, Gina, she's on the next street over from me, so I've never had an issue with it. I never hurt her dogs, but that's besides the point. I wanted that on the record. Yeah, so I guess the question is, do you guys, what are your thoughts, and if any, you know.
This is just, I don't know who,
Sorry? If assuming they met the criteria there.
What was the minimum yard?
3 acres, that's right.
What's the minimum?
3 acres.
I'd have to sit with task force. I would prefer to sit with the ordinance task force because to better understand it. I'd like to attend the next ordinance task force
Oh, okay.
to discuss it with them.
Okay.
I would like to.
Well, I have a concern over spot zoning.
With what?
What is it?
That we start making a lot of exceptions when we already provide for it in the township. Spot zoning is,
No, I thought Luke had said kennels were provided in every, and not that this is a kennel, but obviously a variance of it, but I thought Luke said it was in all.
Right, so this section of code we're looking at here is under general regulations, and general regulations apply to all zones.
But if I may, I think Carl's concern is that it would only be permitted in R2. I mean, what's the justification, if we were to move forward with
Right.
this, what's the justification to limiting it to R2? So that's what, and I'm not gonna respond to that, I don't know the answer. but
yeah, I don't
think-
know the
I
answer.
think
I don't know
that's the
whether it's good,
concern.
bad, or indifferent.
And I would I mean, the ordinance task force already looked at it, so.
Right, so you want to sit down with the ordinance task force?
Yeah, I'd have to think about it more because I mean, that's actually a good point, Carl, so maybe think of.
I mean, I'm not opposed, I just want to make sure we don't set some precedent that we're stuck with in the future.
Can, I'm just trying to think of a way so we can stop, obviously making Mr. Marker come back and forth. If it is, it is. If it isn't, it isn't. I'm just trying to figure out.
No, I'm horrible at speaking in front of people.
So,
I put my foot in my mouth talking, but.
Luke, I don't know how, if you want to set up maybe an email exchange with both Carl and Jason with the ordinance task force, and they can kind of answer each other's questions if they have any, and go that route, and then put it on the next agenda, I guess.
Well,
I mean, I could sit with Bruce and Jim.
okay, well, let me start with the next ordinance task force meeting. It would be Wednesday, the 26th of October. They have reviewed the materials that you just looked at this morning and recommended not making a change to allow the pet sitting as a use in all zones. If the ordinance task force exists to advise the Board of Supervisors on proposed amendments to our zoning code. So I think if the direction is find a way to make this work, and we're sending a supervisor to talk to you about it, then we can put it on the agenda for the 26th.
Well, I only bring it up because Jason asked if you could talk with them. So I think that obviously that would
Wanna hear
probably,
their
yeah,
concerns.
right, that
I
would
just
be.
want to hear their concerns, and
Okay.
that's all. So I could sit with, Jim.
Is it, obviously I want to attend everything I can, but we're away the 26th, of course, visiting
Okay.
family, but I didn't know.
And Bruce, you might have some input as well of some of the notes or anything, but,
I'll have to pull my notes back.
Okay,
See what's
okay.
up. I would rather do it
yeah, absolutely.
in the ordinance task force or the additional, maybe do it in November.
I also called different townships just to get an idea what they do. And Upper Euclid says they do not have any domesticated dog regulations, which I don't, like, they don't have, that was their answer. And West Cowan is 10, and West Brandywine is 6. So just to get an idea of what,
So we're 4, count is 6?
West Cowan is 10, I
10.
believe, yes, and West Brandywine is 6.
Okay.
And Upper Euclid, I don't know. I don't understand how that's
But
possible.
are
but
they
that-
for pet sitting or for family?
Just
pets?
dogs in general. I don't think they,
The complication here is, are you asking for, you're not asking for an exception to the number of domestic animals, you're asking to run a business.
well, yes, but to my existing clients. I don't want to add, I don't want anything bigger or, because people could say, why don't you go,
But it's adding a business in a residential
yes,
zoning neighborhood. That's the dilemma you've put
yes,
us under.
yes.
I mean, if I may, the normal process, which the board's aware of, is for these matters to go first to the ordinance task force. The ordinance task force already looked at the initial draft, and I think they recommended against it. I think what I'm hearing this morning is now it's slightly different. Now it would be limited to R2. So it seems to me to put it back on the ordinance task force agenda for their review and see whether there's any difference in their recommendation. And if you can't attend in October, then put it on the November agenda. And then, of course, after that, an ordinance would have to be drafted. It has to go to the Planning Commission. It has to be reviewed by the Chester County Planning Commission, and then eventually to the board if it gets that far. So it seems to me, put it on the OTR.
And you said you're not available.
26.
All right.
And I did attend a task force meeting before, and that's why I'm starting back at,
Right, but what I'm saying is it has to go through that
I
process.
understand.
Right now, where we are is that we have a recommendation against an task force. So, however, this is slightly different, so perhaps it can go back to the task force and let them look at it.
All right.
As I think Jason suggested.
Yeah, and then that gives Jason a couple months, obviously, 2 months to get with ordinance task force and get any of his questions answered. So if you're not available for the 26th, obviously I want you to be able to,
Yeah,
you know, make your case. And if it is R2, then that changes it a little bit. But let's, Lisa, could you put it for the agenda for November 20, what is it, November 26th?
Well, in November, it would be the 23rd, Wednesday, the
23rd.
23rd.
And then that would give you some time to get your ducks in a row to give to them as well, if there's something that, you know,
okay. So just basically
well, I think any and all questions should be asked before that time. And then, obviously, I think you got a lot of your questions answered from Luke, I think, a couple weeks ago. I just think that there's too many variances to this that obviously, if he has questions, if Carl has concerns on the zoning, spot zoning, we try and hammer that out in you know, the details before the 23rd.
okay. Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Gina.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just,
Nope, all good. Okay,
Can I keep this?
yeah, thank you.
so now I'm gonna turn it over. We're gonna go to Mr. Bates, Vacation Smokehouse Farm.
Morning.
Morning.
After 22 years, I finally want to dedicate the road. So I'm here. I think one of the outstanding issues was the trees that were to be planted up and down the road, and my willingness to say, hey, take that escrow money and put the trees where you need it somewhere else, i.e. Township Park, anywhere you want in the township. So I don't know what procedure you guys have to go through to accept that. I do have letters back and forth from Scott and I talking about it in the past, and you were agreeable back in February of 2019, and I'm hoping you're still agreeable.
Mr. Chairman, may I pose a question? We had a conversation at the Planning Commission last night, and I, for the first time, heard that 22 years ago, the plan did not anticipate offering the spine road or the road for dedication. Is that accurate?
No, we had both a private driveway and the main road. and the main road was always to be dedicated.
What portion is the
Can we-
private, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I
I was just
interrupted
going to
you.
say, real quickly, I mean, that's why I built it to the dedicated standards. If I didn't plan on, dedicating the road, we would have built it differently.
Very good, thank you.
Go ahead, you asked me what part is and isn't, is that?
Right, well, you had indicated there was also a private road. Are you talking
Yeah,
about the
there's
end
a
of the
private
cul-de-sac?
lane. I'm sorry.
No, I'm being rude and interrupting
No,
you,
no, no.
please. Go ahead, you would
Okay.
describe the two.
I think your question was, is there a private lane and then is there a road dedicated, the one that we are putting up for dedication? The one we're putting up for dedication comes up to the cul-de-sac and the private lane comes off of the cul-de-sac.
Okay.
It has 4 houses on it.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, I just learned about this last night. I saw it on the agenda, but I didn't know what it was. I think we need to look at the plan and determine what is being offered for dedication and what is not, and I appreciate what Mr. Bates is saying. However, as the board knows, it's an offer of dedication. The township does not have to take or accept the offer. So I think before we do anything on this, I think the township engineer, myself, and the administration have to look at this and determine what exactly is being offered and what would have to be done if you decide to accept dedication. For example, if this is a 20-year-old road, then it would be appropriate for it to be maybe an overlay, maybe core borings have to be done to make sure it meets township specifications. That's more in Nate's bailiwick. But there are things that have to be considered, and if the board wants to proceed with that, then it makes sense for the staff to do that first and then put it back on the agenda.
I appreciate your comments, Mr. Osties. We did the road, did the final coat on the road in 2017, so it's not a 22-year-old road. And at that time, it was inspected by your engineers, it was signed off,
And that's exactly what we
And it
need
was-
to confirm.
right, and just so you know, Matt and I have been going over, and I mean, with your inspectors, and we came up with a probably 15 item punch list, of which there's only 4 items left on that punch list that I believe. We've already given you the legal description. We've already done the as-bills. We've already done all the monuments. The box culvert down at the bottom over the years has become jammed up with debris. I've cleaned the debris out twice. If I need to clean it out again, I'll be more than happy to do that. I just don't know what else there is. I would respectfully disagree on the core borings because, again, it was inspected back in 2017 and found to be, by your engineers, up to standards.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't know whether core boring is required or not, but there's a process that has to be followed to dedicate, and it sounds like you've already done some of those things, but I think we need to get up to speed so we can make a recommendation to the board if they want to accept dedication.
Can I ask Matt for his comments on it?
I was
Is that-
actually
is
going
that
to ask Matt,
appropriate?
I was going to ask Matt that next
Okay.
question.
For my behalf, I think most of the items I'm going to say are paperwork items, such as Rick said he's done the as-built plans. I was not able to locate as-built plans. I think you said you were going to provide those to us. We also are going to require the deed of dedication itself. And then, let's see, the monuments, I think we need a sign off from
You guys inspected those, correct?
that it was completed. Probably a few other minor items, and the tree issue was one of the items also that Rick had written the letter to the board.
I guess
There
what
would
I,
have to be also an 18-month maintenance bond, because that's the typical requirement for dedication.
that's fine. What I'd like to get cleaned up today is if I can have a a vote that contingent upon the items that Matt feels that I need to provide. And if we can clear up the tree thing, if you guys can give me the, yeah, you know what,
Well,
we're looking to do
the
this.
problem would be, we could give you a contingent vote, yes or no, based on a lot, but unfortunately, the biggest thing is it has to go to the solicitor and to the engineer. So it would also be contingent upon their findings as well. You know what I mean? So that's the hard part, obviously, that's the variable, the unknown.
I would not have a problem with it going, you know, to the,
Again, that is not the normal process. The normal process is to get on the agenda, once a deed of dedication is prepared, signed by the developer, we have financial security for an 18-month maintenance period, and of course, the township engineer has signed off that everything's in order. So it would be, in my view, improper to give any kind of contingent indication that you're accepting dedication.
So, go ahead.
May I, with perhaps one exception, and that is that the developer is asking the board to consider, when working with staff and the solicitor, to come up with a proper offer of dedication, that there would be a substitution for the street trees shown on the plan for trees planted elsewhere. I think at least we can provide that direction clearly today, that is an acceptable substitution if it's the board's will to do so.
I remember this was back when Scott was here.
And I think the thing that comes to mind there, we should confirm that the people that live there don't want the trees,
that's fine.
because those street trees, I presume, are on the recorded plan, so they have a right to them. So we need to determine whether they give up that right or waive installation of the street trees. So again, I don't think we can make that decision this morning.
Well, let's,
And that may have already occurred, I don't know.
I have the letter from Scott that's dated February 5th, 2019, that says, when you discuss this with the board, does somebody, I'm sorry, when you discussed this with the Board of Supervisors some time ago, you offered and they agreed that the trees that were not planned in development could be used community parks and other locations chosen by the township.
yeah, I remember the issue with the trees as well. All right, so it sounds like we have a little bit of housekeeping to do. Why don't we, I guess, Matt, Nate, and Tom, is this something that you guys could wrap up before the next night meeting?
Yeah, Chairman, I would suggest that maybe Matt, myself, Rick, maybe we could just schedule a meeting for sometime next week. Let's sit
fine.
down with the plans, with Matt's list. If we need to go out to the site and confirm some stuff, let's get that list that's 15 items down to 3. And if it's, you got to give us a
Want
document.
to get down to nothing?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we got to get to. It sounds like we're close, but there's definitely a few administrative items that are lacking. So maybe
Okay.
we can just exchange some emails, this week, schedule time for next week. Let's nail this down. I don't think, it's been inspected, it's existing, it's in good condition, but we just got to check all the boxes here.
I'm fine.
Does that
Fine
make
with
sense,
that.
guys?
Yep.
And then hopefully tee this up for November?
And hopefully, prior to that meeting, if you could also provide the deed of dedication, the meets and bounds, whatever paperwork that I was unable to locate.
Yeah, I had that in, so I'll look that up again and get that.
So if I'm hearing it correctly anyway, we had an 18-month maintenance agreement, we had the trees, we had the as-built, the deed of dedication. What else am I missing?
Matt had he had a list of about 15 site items that were signage, repairs, things like that. I think, sounds like some of those might have been resolved, so we'll confirm that. I think that list was a
I
year
would say
old.
most of those have been resolved. Is that-
I would just say maybe,
is that fair?
call that kind of, field items.
Okay.
Kyle.
And when, dedication by ordinance or resolution, Tom?
It would be a resolution.
Be a resolution. So
Accepting
another item that would need to be done before a formal vote is the preparation of a resolution.
Right.
Do you guys have an official bond, the 18-month
Yeah,
thing?
I'll send you a form of a deed, and
You
there
can get all
is-
that to Brian?
there really is no form of a bond, but there's also I'll talk to Brian, because there's also an issue of proving that the title to the road is clear. So I'll discuss that with Brian.
Okay, great.
Can I say one thing? I fully support this request as part of the thing about the tree removal site doesn't need any trees as the planning commission and the landscape architect.
I remember this was back in
And I think we had that discussion before.
That's fine. I appreciate it. Thank you guys very much.
Much.
I'll see you then, is on the 26th, is that, if we get it all cleaned up by then?
Let's meet next week, and then we'll figure out from there, depending on what's left outstanding. But let's target trying to get back in front of the board in November.
I'll call you guys later. Thank
I'm
you.
gonna send you an email right now.
Thank you.
I'm sending you an email right now.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks, guys.
Give this to you? I didn't know,
Oh, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
I didn't know if this mattered.
I see, I saw that. Yeah, is it okay? I have copies? Great. No, thank you.
Thank you.
Up your head.
All right, so, I'm going to turn it over to you for the permission to advertise Chester County Stormwater Ordinance.
Right, so included in your packet this morning, the large format clipped piece is a redlined copy of our existing stormwater code, which is Chapter 345. The attachment to the Chapter 345, that is the model operations and maintenance agreement, or O&M agreement, and proposed revisions to our definition section of our land development code. These amendments are required for the township to adopt. We must adopt the stormwater ordinance, the model stormwater ordinance adopted by Chester County pursuant to Act 167. There were some variables about the model stormwater ordinance that we were able to control, such as the area of disturbance or the area of net new impervious that would trigger regulation by our stormwater ordinance. In presentations before both the Planning Commission and the Ordinance Task Force, our MS4 consultant, Beth Euler, has made presentations about this. The red line copy in front of you contains what I consider the most liberal interpretation of the code. What remains, in my opinion, is mandatory. And I'm asking the board's permission this morning to advertise the stormwater ordinance for adoption at a later meeting of the Board of Supervisors.
Okay, any questions with that? I'm okay with it.
Okay with it.
All right, so we'll table that.
I'm sorry,
No, he wants to vote. I'm okay with it, too. I was just shocked at the complexity and the size.
Welcome to my world.
yeah.
Well, at some point, the world's got to stay. Let's stop it. But anyway, so I'll move that we advertise our Chester County Stormwater Ordinance.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There you go, Luke.
Thank you. Understand, sometimes we do what we want to do, the rest of the time we have to do what we have to do. My enthusiasm for the ordinance is not terribly high, but it is not optional.
Well,
All right, Matt, go ahead with your request for appointment.
Yes, I'm recommending the board appoint Tanner Gledhill as an addition to the road department. Tanner lives in the township. He was a Boy Scout at Hopewell Troop 8, which their meetings are in the McCausland Hall. And he's currently a volunteer for East Brandywine Fire Company. Tanner has experience in construction and tree work, and I've provided a copy of his resume. Respectfully request your permission to hire Tanner Gledhill as a full-time employee of the road department.
Any questions, you guys?
Now, I move we accept the appointment of Tanner Hill to the Public Works Department.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The other two items on my report are just for information for the board.
Okay, Luke again.
Yeah, so we are at, today, the finish line of a very long and involved process of developing a new comprehensive plan for East Brandywine Township. The draft before you today has been available in multiple draft forms at ebrandywine.org/comp plan. It has been properly advertised and sent for 247 comment review at the Chester County Planning Commission. The plan was developed as part of a Vision Partnership Program grant with Chester County. The consultant for the development of the plan is available for questions. Jen is in the audience. But at this time, I'm respectfully asking the Board of Supervisors to adopt Resolution 17 of 22 that would adopt the comprehensive plan. But before you do so, I do want to mention that there was one additional public comment received at the meeting last night, and that was that two of the maps in the draft here, namely map 7 and map 8, show a trail feature in the Timbers development that the HOA would like to see removed. And I have the same comment on the as yet pending official map, which we're not voting on this morning. So,
Is that trailway in right-of-way or on road, or what is it? Is it just,
so the spirit of drawing lines on the official map is to provide a kind of comprehensive view of what trail amenities we're trying to connect in our community. So the attempt is to produce a complete inventory of trail networks for the purpose of connection. It does not represent an invitation for the public to use said trail networks. There's no research done as to whether or not those constitute public easements or for the private use of HOAs. It's just an inventory of recreation amenities in the township. That said, I can appreciate the HOA not wanting a invitation for the public to utilize amenities on their HOA land.
yeah, and I would agree with them. If it's something that was already approved, if someone were to look at a map that was in our comp plan and assume, then you open yourself up to people utilizing it for that purpose, even though you may not even be able to get to it.
Where exactly is this trail connection, first of all? And second of all, the comprehensive plan is a planning document and doesn't necessarily dictate that a trail will occur there. I think the official map would be more of a concern with
I
with
understand
regard.
that, but
Okay.
my point is if the trail was on any private person's property and it was even in the comp plan,
Right.
and someone were to start walking on that property saying, oh, I saw it in one of the plans, that's my concern. And if someone blatantly asked to be removed, clearly, I would assume we would have to honor their wishes because of that, but that's just my take. I'm one of three, but go ahead, Luke, you can answer his question on where exactly.
Luke? Where's the location?
It is the segment of orange line shown on here overlapped by the words Timber Pass.
And if I may, it actually shows on map 7, if you look at the legend, it indicates it's an existing trail, if I'm reading it correctly,
Right, it doesn't say private trail.
or proposed, it says existing.
So I think their request is, it's not, the township has nothing to do with the trail. Don't put it in your
Okay.
comprehensive plan.
But the only
Well, some
thing
of the
that
trails in-
puzzles me is why it was put on there in the first place as an existing trail. I mean, I'm wondering whether that was a requirement of that development.
Yeah, right.
That goes right through the middle of the pond, so.
No.
It goes around it. There is an existing trail there.
No, but what Tom just said is very valid as well. It may have been part of their original as-built plan or
I don't know.
requirement to the township. Obviously, we would have to do some research on that, but that being said, if an HOA doesn't want it, I have to respect their wishes, as long as it wasn't something that was part of a requirement.
I'll also add that many of the trails in the plan, we don't have a right to that property yet. That's for planning. They would like to see a trail there, and they need to work on easements to obtain permission for those locations. So this is an indication of the desire to have a trail or a trail connection through certain areas where we don't necessarily have the rights to that yet. It's, again, for planning. Just for your consideration, that little bit of
Right, and I'd add that the development of a comprehensive plan involves thousands of little decision items like this. And the only reason this one is worthy of conversation at this point is that it was received prior to the end of a comment period that we advertised for making this available. So understand this large document of some 170 pages includes hundreds of decisions like this that not necessarily rise to the level of a Board of Supervisors decision. But I did not want a vote to happen without having given every person who was invited to comment have their comment be known. Quite honestly, I feel like what I'm hearing, I think it should be definitely removed from the official map, but I'm inclined to retain on map 7 and 8 in the comp plan.
Go ahead, Tom. What?
I would, at this point in time, I agree with Luke that we should leave it on there, subject to investigating it and determining whether we have a right to it, and if we don't, we'll have to amend the comprehensive plan. I hesitate to say that, but that amendment process would not be that complicated if it's just to do this.
Agreed,
To amend
and I would
map
add,
7
and I would add to strike existing trails from the section for the key for Timberlake.
Right, but what I'm suggesting is that you consider approving it as is.
Right.
But the administration will look into whether we have a right to that trail under some prior approval. And if we don't, we would bring it back to the board and amend the comp plan.
Well, I don't think that the township having, a public having a right to utilize the trail is necessarily a prerequisite for appearing on these maps. We're using these maps to come up with a plan to connect the dots of recreation amenities distributed throughout the township. This is not an invitation or a marketing material for individuals to use those trails but it's still useful to know where recreation amenities are so that we can connect the dots in our planning process.
And I appreciate that. So I think it's appropriate to consider adopting the plan as it appears and as it was advertised. And if there's an issue with that trail, we can deal with it in the future.
Including using as existing trail when it's not?
Well, we don't know that, though.
Correct.
So what Tom is saying is let, you know, after 15 months of work or whatever, adopt the plan and do the investigation as to whether or not that trail was required as part of the final approval of the subdivision. And if it wasn't, and it is a private trail, then we amend the comprehensive plan update. Did
And I
get
guess
that?
you guys don't have any insight on why it was written as existing.
That's unclear to me. I had asked the last planning commission meeting for us trails not have been I don't know why it's on.
Okay. I don't have a problem following the solicitor's advice if you guys have any other questions. Anything?
No, I actually read the draft and attended a lot of the meetings, and I think they have put a lot of thought and a lot of hard work into this, and it may not be perfect, nothing's perfect, but it's a good blueprint for us going forward. There were some changes and emphasis in certain areas, and I think that was a good and a beneficial, i.e., a little more concern with the traffic situations, vis-a-vis making Guthriesville into a somewhat of a commercial district. I think the priority of making that the commercial district is no longer it's an important thing, but it's not the priority anymore. So this plan kind of wraps all the important items identified in the township survey of about 18 months ago into one plan, and that's why I think this is a good plan in its current form to adopt. If we have to amend it for something like the trail or something, so be it, but, you know, that's, hey, we almost had to amend it because they forgot half the streams on the western part of the township.
But that was an observation on the draft official map.
Right.
Which is not part of
Oh,
the
not
motion
part of this,
or the, what's considered today, and that is
All
also
the maps
corrected.
look the same to me, so.
Right.
All right, so I'm in favor of adopting it.
Okay, you want to make a motion then?
All right, I move we adopt the,
It's actually Resolution 17.
oh, it's a resolution,
2022.
resolution, okay. I move that we adopt Resolution 17 of 2022, the East Brandywine Township, a comprehensive plan update as of 2022.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, you guys can go ahead and check into that trail issue.
And a draft official map will not arrive for this board's consideration with that line shown on it.
Understood.
But I do think it's appropriate that it appears in the comp plan, and I think the risk that someone will turn to page 57 of our comp plan when trying to plan a day of recreation and choosing that location is pretty slim.
They need good eyesight, first of all.
Right. Right.
All right, I'll turn it over to Tom now for consideration of Resolution 18.
You have before you a proposed resolution which has the effect of approving the preliminary plan for what we call the McCausland Plank Tract. But before we get to the substance of that, Chairman Scribner brought to my attention a possible voting conflict on this matter under the State Ethics Act. So in accordance with the act, he has filed a memorandum with the Township Secretary disclosing that conflict. He will abstain from voting on this matter unless the board is unable to take action because of insufficient number of votes to make a decision. If that happens, he is then permitted under the Ethics Act to participate in the vote. So that memorandum has been filed with Lisa, the Township Secretary. With that, I think the board has seen this resolution before. As I said, it has the effect of approving the application subject to several conditions. The township engineer and I think Supervisor Croft did meet with the applicant and its engineer to go over some issues of concern. Some of those issues were addressed, one of them being the site triangle at the internal roads. The plan was amended to make that site triangle comply with the township requirement of 75 feet. So, as I said, there are several whereas paragraphs which I'm not going to go through, but I'll briefly summarize the conditions. One, the plan has to comply with all applicable ordinances and regulations. 2, it has to comply with Pannoni's latest review letter. 3, it has to comply with the Hydroterra review letter, who is the Township Municipal Authority engineer. 4, authorizes the reduction in the drip irrigation area if approved by the authority and if necessary to accommodate a potential Reeseville Road extension. 5, requires all sewer facilities and easements to be dedicated to the municipal authority. 6, requires the obtaining of all outside agency permits. 7, requires an easement agreement for emergency access to and from the development across Parr Lane and Mulligan Road, which are in the Applecross development. Parenthetically, that agreement has already been drafted and is essentially in order. 8, requires the formation of a homeowners association. 9, requires that the internal trails be accessible to the general public. 10, requires the recording of a riparian corridor management plan. Also, that has been added to the plan as an additional sheet. 11, the landscape plan shall include a year-round vegetative buffer between the property and the right property, which is adjacent. 12, requires intersection improvements at the proposed connection of Road A and Horseshoe Pike. 13, prohibits parallel parking on the internal private roads. 14, requires access for school buses and approval of the Downingtown Area School District. 15, requires approval of Township Fire Marshal for the internal road system. 16, requires the dedication of a right-of-way for the potential Reeseville Road extension. 17, requires a road stub as depicted on sheet 6 of the plan to again accommodate the potential Reeseville Road extension. And I would just say also that this plan doesn't approve the Reeseville Road extension. If the board was to approve this plan, it only reserves a right to build that extension, or I should say the land area to potentially build it, but it doesn't approve the extension. It doesn't affect any other private property rights. 18 requires a location of mailboxes as approved by the township. 19 requires the allocation of a maximum impervious coverage to each lot. 20 also requires the depiction of a building and deck envelope on each lot. 21, landscaping plan for riparian buffer shall be amended if necessary as determined by the township engineer. 22, certain trees shall not be used in the plan, in the landscape plan. They may already have been eliminated. 23 requires the payment of a fee in lieu of on-site recreational land, subject to the board determining whether any credit will be given to the applicant for on-site amenities. 24 limits the number of residential units to 89, subject to being reduced if necessary in the final plan review. 25, comply with the previous zoning hearing board order. 26, comply with this board's conditional use order. 27, obtain all outside regulatory permits, including NPDES, sewage planning module approval, water quality management permits, and a highway occupancy permit. 28 requires a drainage improvement agreement with PennDOT if there are any facilities in the PennDOT right-of-way for drainage. 29 requires the execution of the Form Township agreements relative to land developments and subdivisions. 30 requires reimbursement to the township of all outstanding consultant fees. 31, the applicant has to construct all roadway improvements shown on the plan. 32, no signage plans are approved as part of this potential approval. 33 requires notification to potential buyers of the homeowners association agreement and restrictions on the plan. That's also noted in condition 34. I'm sorry, condition 34 says that if any of these conditions are determined to be invalid, they'll be severed from the approval or not enforced. 35 indicates that this decision shall not be used as a justification for waivers. 36, the plan has to comply with if the compliance with these conditions raises other issues, the final plan has to be amended to comply with those issues. 37 says that all conditions must be resolved to the satisfaction of the township. 38 indicates that the decision is binding on the applicant and any future owners. And 35 is a standard condition which requires consent of the applicant to the conditions, and if there's a failure of consent, the application is denied. I understand that this is rather lengthy, but it is a preliminary approval, and many of these conditions I would describe as standard conditions that are attached to any preliminary approval. Thank you.
I have a question, just to understand the process, and I understand what you're saying here, that this is preliminary. But the example is the trails. In our engineer's report, the township requires trails to be paved macadam, and whether that's the best source of covering a trail is arguable, but in the plans, or in one of the waivers, is they want to put wood chips, which is, to me, the worst covering for a trail. And I think in your resolution is that I think they're asking for a waiver, which will get into my second point. I think it's on number 10 here or something. Oh, 9, the trails and terminal shall be constructed by the applicant as part of the project. But they're asking for a waiver, and I don't see that waiver in here. If we pass this preliminary, are we waiving our requirements for a paved trail?
This approval does not approve any waivers. They're going to be deferred until final.
Because there's still 22 unresolved items or pending.
Correct. And the approval is subject to resolution of those pending items
All right,
in
right.
the Pannoni review, subject to your
The
approval.
one that we just got on Monday. So you've worked many late nights here.
Well,
I mean, I haven't had time to really review this thing. I mean, I think it's difficult for us who are responsible for this to be given such short notice as to what really changed. And I couldn't get it until this morning because we didn't have any drawings to look at or anything. I mean, I'm not against the plan, but I'm just against this process. This process seems to have gone off the track, and nothing is, I mean, a few things got resolved, but some of these.
well, let me, before you do that, Vic, I appreciate that. And I understand.
I know you're trying to make it.
Right, and I
Right.
understand, and I frankly agree with your observation. And it's no criticism on anybody. The plan has been pending for a long time.
I know that. That's,
And Pannoni and they did the best they could and issued a new review letter on October 3rd. The authority review letter wasn't issued until yesterday.
I haven't seen that.
So I'm sure you haven't even seen that. So I certainly appreciate what you're saying. On the other hand, you know, the applicant has been waiting a long time, and I've gotten urged to try to get it done, but I represent you. I don't represent them. We do have an extension until, I think, the beginning of November. And I know they're not going to like this, but if the board feels more comfortable in deferring this until your, I think it's October 20th meeting, you have the right to do that, as long as I don't have to read the whole thing.
But my question is, and maybe Vic can address this in a minute here, but, and Nate, is anything else gonna change between now and October 20th? I mean, that's really what it boils down to, since it is a preliminary.
I mean, these items have been discussed for the last 2+ years. And the wood chip trail, for example, we've met with the trail committee. We've gotten their approval of the wood chip trail. We cannot pave the wood chip trail through the drip area. So that's a conflict with the sewer
Understand, but
authority.
there's rubber, there's artificial rubber things, there are other things other than wood
But we
chip.
can only take the advice of the trail committee. And the trail committee suggested.
They
the
don't
wood
make the
chip trail.
decision.
Then that can be a condition of the board. But understand that we've been working with the planning commission for 2+ years. We've been taking their direction. If we are told to go to the trail committee and get their advice, we've been taking their advice, implementing it into the plan. So you can understand.
I understand your
I understand you got a
conundrum.
review letter yesterday, but we've been working on this for 2.5 years.
I appreciate all that. I just want to, even though it's preliminary, I just want a preliminary plan that has reasonable things that are open, and I consider, well,
I think these are all
haven't even
fairly
had time.
typical preliminary plan conditions. The technicalities we can work out with Nate. Of the 39 comments on the letter from yesterday, 11 require board approval. So we've worked with the landscaper, we've met with the landscape architect, we've met all that. It says this is subject to the board's approval. So that's 11 right off the bat. Of the 39, 14 are resolved, and then 7 refer to the traffic study. So that's being worked out with PennDOT.
Yeah.
So essentially, that's 32 of the 39.
Right. Another
comments.
example is the emergency vehicle turning radiuses and the school bus things.
That's resolved. We have your fire marshal has approved it. Lisa's got the letter. That is already resolved. That's been submitted to the township. That is in the township.
Well, it hasn't been submitted to me.
The draft resolution with, but I only can control what I can control.
I
And that's
understand
why
that.
it's getting really frustrating. We have supplied this information. We've been working on an easement agreement with Applecross for 4 months. It's gone back and forth.
That I understand.
Between
that
your
I'm not even-
solicitor
right,
and
no, no.
our
That's
attorney.
a valid open item for a final.
I think all these are valid open. We're at preliminary. If we don't satisfy those conditions, we have nothing. We're not asking for final, we're asking for preliminary. If we don't satisfy the conditions, we don't have an approval. It's that simple.
But once you receive preliminary, you have to receive final, so
Well,
I prefer,
Only,
you know.
Jason, only if we meet the condition.
Correct. Vic, I mean, I haven't even seen the hydroterra letter from yesterday, but also, have you shown how you're gonna get the effluent back to the site? Have you, I mean, I think that was
That's,
outstanding last time.
yeah, and that's a part of the Part 2 permit, part of the DEP.
Well, I don't know,
Part 2.
I haven't seen the hydroterra's letter, that's the review.
Hydroterra's letters are all technical. Again, if we don't comply with Hydroterra's letter, we don't have the approval.
I haven't seen it, though.
But it's, you know, a
Well, I
sewer
can't
run
make a
from
decision
here
if
to
I
here
don't have anything in front of me to even read about, I just see like, based on a letter that I haven't seen.
We've seen the last letter, and essentially,
Dick, it
we
was
can
yesterday.
satisfy.
I know your-
The
I
one-
know your
The
frustration.
one prior to that, I mean, these are standard, you've got to get from A to B, and they're third-party issues. We're working on the planning modules with DEP. That's a DEP issue. That's not really dictated by the township. Now, yes, Joe will go through and review it, he'll be part of that, but it's part of the third-party process.
I understand, I'd
Again,
like to
we're
see it and
looking
review
for-
it if I'm gonna vote on it. That's all.
All right, but, and I basically agree with you, Jason, but the third-party stuff, which, may I call you Vic?
Certainly,
That Vic is bringing up.
please do.
Is out of his control, and I'm willing to approve a preliminary on things that are out of his control, but I want a clean letter before I do a final. I don't think anything's gonna change between now and October 20th. That's my concern.
Yeah, if I can chime in, I think,
I mean, do we have any deadlines? I know we have a
November 2nd.
November
We have an
2nd.
extension to make a decision until November 2nd.
Is that
So-
a final decision?
No, preliminary.
Preliminary.
And let me just add one thing, that as I think I said in my recitation, some of these items are resolved or are in the process of being resolved. For example, as you said, the agreement with Applecross. I prepare these to protect the township. In other words, there may be things that are already done, but I put them in the resolution anyway, so nothing is missed. So there,
I know.
again.
I trust you.
And the other thing that I think is important to understand is some of these, I think Vic might have pointed these out, some of these items require decisions by this board. For example, the fee in lieu of recreation space. At some point, you need to decide, you need to understand what recreational facilities are being provided on this property and whether you're willing to give any credit to the applicant for those facilities, or
Does that happen before final?
that will happen at final, or it
At
could-
final.
it could even be.
Are we gonna be
well,
able to-
it could even be a condition of final, although I would recommend that we resolve that before final. So that the only thing left at final is obtaining planning module approval or Part 2 permit or the HOP, those kinds of things. And the standard township agreements, the developer's agreement, the financial security agreement, those kinds of things, the stormwater maintenance agreement.
Nate, go ahead. You had. Yeah, let me just get, you can, but let me get Nate real quick,
Yeah,
because I don't want you to lose your train of thought.
No, I kind of want to comment on two things. One is, to Carl's point, I agree. Nothing's going to change substantially on this plan between now and the 20th. So I do want to confirm, that I do agree with that representation. I think that's fair. Second, as I think most of us here will recall, there were some maybe lessons learned with the Giant project, okay? And one of those lessons learned was there's a lot of code requirements that say specifically, subject to Board of Supervisors approval. And so one of the lessons learned from that experience, and me coming in after the fact, was, an engineer arbitrarily agreeing to something on a plan without updating or including the Board of Supervisors. So in my letter, there's probably 10, 11, 12 things, Vic, if I recall,
Yep.
where I essentially say is, I might call it pending, but it's only pending because ultimately it's a board decision. And I want to make sure that's in my letter and that's clear to you guys, so that you're not, because I think some of those things were missed during that Giant project that ended up being, causing some trouble. So that's what those
Right,
comments
and
are.
I don't want, right, so
Yeah.
my concern is that when do we make those decisions? All at once, like with a gun to our head on the night of the meeting where we got the papers the day before?
And that's up to you guys. I mean, that's your guys' call, absolutely.
No, that should not be the process, but I would agree with you that those items are not going to be resolved between now and October 20th.
Right.
There are too many things to resolve. So I'm confident that this resolution contains enough conditions that enable the board to make those decisions between the preliminary and the final, as well as resolving any outstanding issues that come from the engineers.
And we have, well then, can we table till the night meeting just so we can at least read it and get the review letters? And
There's no
I haven't
reason,
even seen the updated drawings. so-
yeah, there's no reason you can't do that.
Can I just give a, for instance?
And
though?
I respect that too. I mean,
I just like to be able to
I
see
don't like to
drawings.
see you in this position.
I just don't feel comfortable.
I understood.
But in all due respect, these comments have been on every letter that Nate has written. From day one. And for instance, the landscaping and lighting. The landscaping shall be provided for every 1,000 square feet of building gross area. We went through the conditional use 2 years ago, or a year ago rather, and discussed this at length with how we're addressing and putting as much landscaping on there. To Nate's point, he says that the landscaping has been recommended by the planning commission and is subject to approval due to the modifications in the plan. So this has been presented, it was part of the conditional use hearing, it's been in the letter ever since, but it still requires the board to say, yes, we agree that you have done, we've met with your landscape architect. I think Nate's comment is the amount is deficient, but The increase, the plant quantities has been provided, however, it's subject to the board approval. So again, these are not new items. This is not something that came up yesterday. These have been in the letter from day one, and it's part of, going all the way back to the conditional use, how many trees can we put on this plan that physically fit? And I think we've discussed at length that your landscape ordinance requires an exorbitant amount of trees that are physically impossible to fit on the site. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the, or 7 of the pending issues require the board to say, you know what, we've had our professionals look at the landscape plan, we've looked at the landscape plan, we agree that it complies with the intent of the code. But to make those 7 items go away, the board has to say, yeah, we agree with all our sub-consultants. We agree with our professionals that that has been met to the best extent possible.
I would just like to add, over the last 4 years, your consultants have been involved and have been very thorough. I've very rarely been to a meeting like this where it's slowed down whenever we have the planning commission who have the support. We have Mr. Oestes, who is very detailed support. Your township engineer, we have their support, and we have and will continue to work through the process with them. But we have addressed every, and if you have 1 or 2 concerns, those that they're different from your consultants, then
Tell us.
tell us. I mean, that's it. Just tell us
Do it.
specifically what they are, and we'll address them. But we have obligations to our sellers as well. We're not in any way trying to push this through. If we were trying to go on some kind of accelerated timeframe, I would sit here and absolutely acquiesce to you. But it's not the case. In fact, just the opposite. We've spent thousands of hours with all your people, and your consultants support us. And it's preliminary.
I just want to add one thing. Well before I had a conflict of interest with this started, at the time, I was the representative from the board that sat down with you guys, with Nate, we're going back 3 solicitors ago. That's how long this has been going on.
Yeah.
And the previous board sat down again, and this was just before Carl. So, trust me when I tell you, I understand your frustration. This has gone through Kristen, this has gone through, who was the?
Mark Jonas.
Mark Jonas, and this has gone to Tom now. So now we're on our 3rd solicitor, we're on our 2nd or 3rd board, so.
Second manager.
Exactly. So, I totally get your frustrations, is where I'm going with this. I guess my question is, for the board, if this is something that you say, okay, we're still not gonna have the answers we want by next morning meeting, or next evening meeting, which is in 2 weeks, then when's enough? You know, so we have to figure this out. And I think, you know, just as 3 things got kicked down the lane just today on this township meeting, we gotta figure some of these things out. We're starting to backlog things onto the next meeting, the next meeting.
Yeah, but
No, I hear.
I just want to be able to read, I mean, you say, you know, what, if you disagree with your consultants, then let us know. I don't know if I disagree because I haven't read the letter.
Yeah,
I
but
haven't,
the
haven't
hydroterra
even-
letter, for example, is just technical items
I
that,
haven't seen it though. I mean, I
but you saw the
believe you, but I'm
prior
just sa-
one, and the prior one was only
I just don't feel
technical
comfortable.
issues.
That's all. I just don't feel comfortable receiving something yesterday and then expecting me to not have read it and blindly, you know, I'm not saying there's something wrong with it, but I'm saying I like to have 2 weeks at least to see the updated drawings in front of me and read our actual consultants' letters.
And,
That's all.
and where we are procedurally, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, it's all right, I'm just,
Um,
I'm not
and if
expecting things to
nobody-
really change. I just want to see it. That's,
If a board member's not willing to make a motion to adopt this resolution and second it, then it'll be tabled until the next meeting.
Although I agree with Jason, I also understand, and I have the same frustrations, but quite frankly, I believe I will make a motion to adopt this because nothing's gonna get solved. And I think our solicitor has tried to cover the open bases. I don't wanna keep kicking it down the road, but please don't come before me for a final until this stuff, other than the HOA or other normal things that are open. And I think you're, for one reason or another, I feel put upon and disrespected in getting the information so late. So,
I think if there's something in our court that we can do to make that better, we're happy to do so. Please, please let us know. I don't know
well, I think,
where
look,
the
I've
disconnect
I've
is.
been on your side of the fence.
Sure, I
over
understand.
my lifetime, okay? And I understand that, but I thought our township had provisions where if you wanted to be on the agenda, you had the stuff in a week before and all that.
Oh, we have. We submitted these plans, I think, 2+ weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. We submitted them right after our meeting.
No, you didn't.
We electronically and hard copies of everything that was submitted.
But then our consultants have X amount of
Yeah,
time
I
to
mean-
review it, and then we have to get that.
Right, I mean, Nate didn't even get his letter out, and my gosh, he was away on vacation and still got the letter out, but that wasn't until Monday. Well, guess what? I have other responsibilities here. I was here all day Tuesday in budget meetings and things like that.
I
I mean,
appreciate that.
I can't,
We appreciate that, and we'll make a commitment, especially now that you're here and stabilized. Any of these things for final, we understand how to do that process.
Yeah.
And we're gonna be looking for your feedback as early as possible.
well, I know how important it is to get a preliminary approval. I do understand that, and I will make a motion to,
To adopt Resolution 18 of 2022 as summarized by the solicitor.
correct. So I will make that motion.
Well, I have to read it, so I'm not sorry. I'm not gonna be able to.
Okay, so we don't have a second. Under the Ethics Act, Mr. Scribner can act on the motion. If he wants to second it, he can, because the board is unable to act otherwise.
Yeah, and I just want to preface before I do, Planning Commission's okay with this? Our engineers okay with this?
Preliminary plan, I think this is about average for a preliminary plan.
And our solicitor's okay with this?
I'm okay, yes.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye.
Hey.
All right, thank you, guys. Sorry to make you go through the ringer for so many years on this, but I appreciate we'll get to the end of this. Okay, so we're going to move on to the final approval for Brandywine. This is Resolution 19 of 2022, final approval, Brandywine Walk subdivision.
That matter, we've got an additional extension from the applicant until your October 20th meeting, so I would recommend you table that matter until then.
Understood. I'm going to turn it over for public comment on non-agenda items. Ms. Mosher.
Good morning. I wanted to bring you up to date on what's happening at the Bondsville Mill with the culp clearing garden. We have, the soil is just about completely in place, and the second or third week in October, we expect the delivery of the first phase of the plants, the trees and the bulbs. We expect to have those in the ground by the middle of November. And moving forward with the mill gardens, I wanted to bring you up to speed because we have a presentation next Wednesday night, October 12th, on the gardens here in this room. And the press has been invited, and I don't want you to hear about stuff floating around if you didn't actually know what the heck we were doing over there. It has been discussed and that we, instead of calling ourselves the gardens at Bondsville Mill, that we consider calling ourselves the Arboretum at Bondsville Mill. We have so many educational programs on native plants, well, just nature in general. They feel that all of our gardens qualify to fall under that agenda. It doesn't mean anything except changing our name. And nobody ever endorsed our name in the first place, so now we're going to try to officially do that. I wanted to invite each of you to the program next week so that you'll be able to hear David talk about what it is we're doing. He's going to discuss in depth what we're doing in the gardens and the importance of what we're doing. And so I'd like to invite each of you to this meeting. Please bring a guest, and I'll hold the seats for you. You may know that Luke won't let me have any more people in the room than 80. Therefore, I'm holding seats.
Thank you.
That's okay, Luke.
I'm sorry, I don't remember. Whatever the fire marshal sign on the front is, would be my opinion.
And you're absolutely right. It is a fire marshal requirement. And Lisa said it was 81, so. But I don't want to have you come in and not be able to come in. Any questions?
I would assume that calling it an arboretum would be better only for grant purposes as well. I think it sounds more prestigious, and I would, just that's my 2 cents.
It really will, and as Carl heard yesterday at the budget meetings, we have raised, well, I'll say this. People come to the gardens, they look around, they see all the flowers, and then they stand there on the bridge and they say, who pays for this? And all of my gardeners have been, know very clearly to stand there and say, we get everything here, garden-wise, is through donations or grants. Now, as I said at the budget meeting yesterday, in the last 2 years, I have probably arranged for close to $20,000 in donations and grants. And I have a grant coming in for, excuse me for being specific, $4,699 in the next couple of days that will pay for what we're doing up in the amphitheater with the stone base and so forth. So calling it the Arboretum will make it more prestigious. We will be able to apply for other grants using that terminology and listing everything that we've already been doing. Anything else? No?
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah. Thank you. And Luke, I'd like to meet with you at your earliest convenience about this meeting. I know that it's caught you by surprise.
Yeah, I look forward to meeting with you.
I know. No,
Probably not today.
This is good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to add 2 non-agenda items. The first one was I had received a phone call from a resident of Hopewell pertaining to where we were with their request for speeding through the neighborhood. And they were having for Hopewell was having their HOA meeting last, I believe it was Tuesday or Wednesday, and they had asked if we were going to be representing. I was having issues with the proximity where I was with cell coverage, so I actually had cell issues with both of you guys. But where are we with communications back with this resident from Hopewell, and if there was anything that we needed to follow up on to put closure to this?
So, I too was in a meeting with Parks and Recreation relative to their budget request, but I did send an email to the board in the afternoon of our communication with my understanding of where we stood. I'll say that I've had no communication with any member at HOA, so if there's a person I need to information, I'm happy to do so. I have not reached out to anyone at the HOA. My understanding of where we are is, 1, in the comprehensive plan that we just adopted, we identified the need for a comprehensive set of criteria for us to figure out when the township should invest in traffic calming as one of the deliverables in the comp plan. Because in the absence of our own local restriction or our own local definition of what constitutes a road in need of traffic calming features, we can rely on PennDOT's manual for traffic calming. At the onset of the concerns about cut-through traffic there, we engaged the then township traffic engineer to do a study. The engineer found that neither the cut-through traffic, the speed, or the volume was sufficient to warrant traffic calming features. And that the ultimate solution to the concerns faced by the residents in Hopewell was the construction of the connector road associated with the Giant and with the improvements to North Guthriesville, namely prohibiting left in and left out maneuvers at North Guthriesville to prevent people from cutting through the neighborhood. I know that the board said, outside of what PennDOT's manual suggests, or outside of what the engineer recommends, that the board would consider temporary traffic calming features in the neighborhood. And I know that staff met with a vendor who produces benches, you know, the tabletop speed bumps there. I think the core question that I would want an answer to from the board before I made a call to Hopewell is that something that the board was willing to pay for, or that we would say we would allow you to install it at your cost?
Okay.
I think that's the key question.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Well,
And they're willing to.
we had also talked about, if we were to get, Chief, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I remember we had talked about if we were to get a set of temporary ones, use them in multiple areas in the township, they could try them out. If they like them, they could purchase them from us. This is kind of how I recall this conversation going. And if not, then they were on their own to purchase their own. We weren't going to purchase them for developments. We were just going to, since it was becoming more of an issue with multiple developments at a time.
Okay. Then, I guess then the action is twofold. Someone from staff needs to reach out to the Hopewell HOA and say that we will be purchasing movable traffic at the township's expense to be temporarily installed.
Well, so I'll leave this up to Chief too, because obviously this is going to involve, well, Matt, it's going to involve you as well, because it would be snow plowing. So this is going to be a threefold problem, but what I don't want to do is, I feel as though we dropped the ball on this and we need to get closure to it, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, and the starting point would be, the last I recall, at a public meeting, we agreed that we would get temporary ones. We weren't going to leave them on site. They would have to purchase them if they wanted to keep them, and that we would remove them and put them in another development because we had multiple going at the same time. That's kind of how I remember that going. Go ahead, Bruce.
Quick question.
Or go ahead.
Do you recall what the important speed were for the study?
There's a letter that was written by Andy Heinrich, and it was expressed in terms of percentile of the posted speed, and it did not reach the threshold for traffic calming described in PennDOT's traffic calming manual.
I'm just curious how much speeding there actually is.
Again, the consultant's recommendation was that no traffic calming features were necessary there. I appreciate that the board is exploring an alternative to provide a service to the neighborhood on a temporary basis, but that was not the recommendation of the traffic engineer.
And if I recall, the resident in question that we're speaking of was almost struck, or something happened that warranted this. There was a speeding issue where I can't remember that allegedly there was an issue with the car, and that's what started the whole thing, that coming around a bend fast or something along that line. But Chief, go ahead, if you have anything to add to this.
Just a couple things. We also discussed that Andy's report had indicated putting the speed bumps in locations that I didn't think were even gonna help the situation. They were mainly coming right off of Hopewell Road into the development, and then coming off of North Guthriesville, it was in a location that wasn't addressing the residents' issues. So I believe the HOA was gonna discuss and talk to their members as to who would be willing to have them in front of their houses, because there were issues about noise that they make when you go over them and whatnot. I don't remember seeing any feedback from that. The other point I want to make is that up until the email I saw the other day, and I think I might be wrong, but I think what generated that email was the fact that they were having an HOA meeting and they didn't have any information. We haven't received any other speeding complaints from over there. Now, Andy's report, my review of everything that's been going on there, and I believe Matt's opinion, is it's not a speeding problem. It's a volume problem. And we're not going to correct the volume problem of traffic going through there until we have our relief roads in place. So, again, I guess this study was done, what, over a year now ago, right? It's been at least
Yeah.
a year? So I don't know whether doing another study would help. I don't think it's going to in regards to speed. It might give us a better indication of traffic going through, but also remember, Little Washington Bridge has been closed. So they had a higher volume of traffic going through there because of that. Now that the bridge is open, I'm sure it's let off a little bit.
Right.
But I also, following up on Luke, I also have not heard back from anyone in the HOA or Jen, who originally sent the emails.
Right, so just to be clear, where my recommendation is, there are many neighborhoods in the township that are dissatisfied with the speed and volume of cars in their neighborhood. My recommendation as an administrative professional is that we establish a standard for what constitutes a problem, and we stick to it. In this instance, in the absence of a local standard, there is the state standard on what constitutes an inappropriate amount of cut-through traffic or an inappropriate speed of the traffic. And this complaint does not rise to that level. But I work for the board. If the board wants me to explore making a purchase and an installation, we will do so. My recommendation is that we would politely inform the HOA that it does not rise to the standard that traffic calming is necessary.
Again, I just want to, put some closure to this one way or the other. If we are going to purchase, and this is a big if we are going to purchase them in the future, obviously, I agree with you, we have to set a standard. But on the same token, I feel as though we open this box up, and I think the disconnect was on our end. I think at the very least, we owe an email exchange with the resident and the HOA. I know in this particular instance, the HOA put up a no through traffic sign, and that had to be removed. So obviously, in their eyes, the HOA's eyes, there was an issue. And so for that, as I said, that's why we started coming up with solutions to this problem, and that was what we decided back then. But at the very least, we have to open up that communication with the resident and with that board as well, just to say, hey, this is where we are.
Mr. Chairman, another thing I want to point out too is it's not just the matter of putting these down. We're also going to have to properly sign them also, so that motorists coming up on these have a
ahead,
warning
so
that it's
so
coming. And I would also recommend that we not use speed bumps, that we use speed humps, and there is a big difference.
Yeah,
So,
and also, since they are temporary, snow plowing season's upon us, if.
you might want to wait.
Yeah, if this is something that will eventually get considered, obviously we have time right now, we're coming up to snow plowing season. I would say no sooner than May 1st, they would go down and up and back, off the roadway by, say, October 31st is what I would think. Because that's the last thing we need is the snow plows taking out a township investment if it does occur in the future.
If I can, there are other warrants that have to be met, not only speeding and cut-through traffic, but there's other warrants as far as the people that live in the vicinity of the proposed speed hump have to essentially say, yes, they're okay with it, or no, they're not. That's all part of the speed study that would need to be.
Can we put this as an action item for both you and Luke and maybe even Nate to get some type of an email back to these guys, the HOA, and including this residence? Just so this is another one of those things that's been going on for 2 years, and it's time to start doing some house cleaning and putting to bed some of these issues.
I have emails back as far as 2006 from different.
But I have a question. If they don't meet the criteria, the state criteria, and we have no local criteria, why do we want to start putting in a particular neighborhood? I mean, our
Oh,
neighborhood.
no, we're not necessarily going to. We're saying just in the future, if we do decide to ever do this, we at
okay.
least have some protocol in
I mean,
place. And as I said, if it doesn't
I
happen.
know you got complaints up there in Tunbridge, and then you had a car up there at least once, and didn't notice anything.
Right, we've had cars
yesterday, I was literally run off the road by a wild pickup that ran 3 stop signs up there. I couldn't believe, in fact, I tried to get the license number. And a car was hit recently up there. The lady was stopped at Hilltop and Blakely, and I believe it's the same pickup, came around the corner and took out her front bumper. So, I mean, it's virtually every neighborhood in the township, and it probably is a volume issue.
Okay, so you guys can handle that in the next week or so?
Yeah, I want to be, first of all, I'm very grateful for you setting staff priorities. I sincerely, I know I've had a sit-down with Carl, and we've gone through all the current projects, and it is true that unless there is a champion for a cause, things get lost. And so I do want to say I appreciate you setting a priority. What I want to be clear on is exactly what it is we're doing. One is we're definitely reaching out and communicating with the residents. Are we also coming together with a punch list of what we would expect the HOA to be able to provide, such as sign-offs for locations and the necessary petition, Matt, for people to place the table?
Well, I think the HOA needs to understand that even if it wasn't Hopewell's HOA, if it was Applecross, if it was Timberlake, if it was whoever, the requirements would be X, Y, and Z. And, you know, though the township may someday offer this option for temporary speed bumps, it would have to be if all these requirements were met, because it might just, township developments might say, forget it at that.
Yeah, and look, if I could chime in real quick, I'm not intimately familiar with the situation. We can certainly help bring a fresh perspective, maybe some ideas. The other thing I would suggest that maybe long-term, Luke, is getting an ordinance placed regarding traffic calming. We have that in other municipalities, and it just sets the bar for expectations. So your neighborhood wants a speed hump, you need to have X% of the residents sign saying they want it, and then if we do it, this is the minimum stuff that's gonna happen. Otherwise, it's always a 50-50 proposition.
Yep.
I just dealt with a client, we removed them, and we replaced them in kind as part of a road program. I mean, you would have thought we, killed somebody's kid. It was just, you can't ever win with speed humps. So unless you've got something really specific, you're always going to end up with the same discussion. So might be a good action item for next year as well.
Yep, and I can tell you, just to follow up on that, there were speed bumps that went in another development by the builder during construction. Someone's transmission was taken out, they sued the builder, and they were out the next day. So I understand there's definitely situations that could arise that could be an issue.
So staff and the consultants will be developing a punch list of what we're asking of the HOA to do prior to the installation of speed tables at the township's expense.
Well, I think Nate just hit the nail on the head. I think an ordinance has to be enacted. If you guys okay with doing an ordinance, a catch-all for everybody, and then build off of that? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Are you guys okay with?
Chairman, those expenses should be on the HOA, not the township.
No,
We've
we're
already
not.
set a precedent.
This is to go to the ordinance task force to set an ordinance that if it ever were to, this is what the requirements would be. And again, we can decide it as be needed basis, but at least if you have set up.
Okay, so I'm communicating to the HOA residents that the township will be adopting a local set of standards for when traffic calming is necessitated.
Right, but
And
for their situation, we just gotta let them know that right now, that it was found that there was no speeding, and that obviously if they wanna go through the direction of the ordinance, if we enact one, we're happy to do that as well.
Okay.
And
All
I
right.
wouldn't commit to adoption.
Right.
We say we're researching.
I say considering.
But as I said, this has been going on for 2 years, and you said as long back as 2006. I just wanna.
Right, but it is, there are a number of moving targets in addition to, we keep moving the goalposts. So yes, we're not taking the kick, but we also keep moving what we're aiming at. And now I understand that the deliverable will be a local policy on responding to resident concerns about volume or speed in their neighborhoods and how the township will respond if that criteria is met. Got it.
Would you be able to provide
I'm
samples?
literally sending you a draft that we use in another municipality that's been pretty successful for us.
Okay.
I'll send it to the chief, Luke, and Matt, and we can start noodling it.
And I don't even think it's an ordinance. I think it's just a policy to be adopted by resolution.
Can I ask a real dumb question?
No questions, dumb, Carl.
Oh, this one's going, you're gonna think that instead of a bump, can't you have a ditch? No, that eliminates the snow plowing problem.
No, you end up
Why
with-
can't you have a ditch?
Because it doesn't drain out, so you get
Okay, I
climbing water
figured maybe
issues.
water.
You'll have a slip and slide.
All right, the next one that I had for the non-agenda items was, Mr. Shillo had sent an email pertaining to his property on Zinn Road. I don't know the street number. The best I can do to explain this was items were removed from his property, a swimming pool, maybe a patio, or a deck. Swimming pool and a deck were removed. Then he went to apply for an application to do an addition and
I think it's a garage.
or garage, okay.
A big garage.
And the removable permeable surfaces weren't credited towards his new project, and he was asking if it could be, and I think, Nate, you were involved in this. The moral of the story is, I explained to him that we would have to talk about this at a public meeting, and, to deliberate and give feedback, so on and so forth. He had emailed me this morning saying he couldn't be here today, but if we had an opportunity to talk about it, he would love some feedback or insight on this. And I don't know if this was, Luke had started an email exchange on this.
So, yeah, it's kind of difficult to describe, but the current stormwater ordinance and the new ordinance, when we adopt it, it does set a standard for when you have to do stormwater management as 1,000 square feet of net new impervious. So if we imagine a site that has a patio on it, and the homeowner tears up the patio and instead puts in a deck, in the same location, they would not have to do stormwater management because they just swapped in the same location one type of impervious for another. In this homeowner's instance, they removed impervious surface elsewhere on the site and installed new impervious in a different location. It is the applicant's perspective that they should not have to do stormwater management because they're not creating any net new impervious from a site perspective. And I'm highly sympathetic to that argument. That is not, however, what the model ordinance says. The model ordinance does not permit that, and that's the interpretation of our codes professionals. They agree that you cannot avoid needing to do stormwater management by destroying impervious surface elsewhere on the site. And their primary concern has to do with the restoration of the removed impervious surface to a pre-development condition. So I'm very sympathetic, but I can't change the model ordinance. There is, however, a way that we can accommodate this individual's request, and that is that the stormwater ordinance allows the governing body to do a waiver if what they're proposing meets the spirit of the ordinance. So my recommendation is that this individual needs to apply to the Board of Supervisors for a waiver. Is that?
Yeah, and I think, again, I'm paraphrasing back to an email from several weeks ago. You had said the words new net impervious, and that's where his argument was. Because, as you read in the email, it clearly, the net issue.
I agree with him, and that would be my preference on the way that the ordinance would work. Because I think that not giving people credit for eliminating stormwater impervious surfaces on their lots encourages them to keep the old and just add the new. If they have to do stormwater management either way, what's the incentive to destroy the old, unused impervious and restore it to a natural state? We're basically penalizing them by forcing them to do stormwater management. I'm just saying that's not what the law says. But there's a way around And I suppose I'm guilty of, when explaining the stormwater ordinance, I say, you have to do stormwater management when when you do 1,000 square feet of net new impervious. That's Luke trying to explain a complex law in a short sentence. I probably should say, as long as you're not creating 1,000 square feet of net new surface while eliminating elsewhere and not replacing in the same location. I have to have a simple version of the law to explain it to residents.
Yep. Nate, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's great. I think it's a reasonable, we almost apply that more like on a policy basis in other municipalities. It's meeting the spirit of the intent of the code, right? So if you're gonna remove it over there and it's not jamming up an adjacent property owner, 9 times out of 10, I'm saying, we'll bless that. We may still permit it, we may still log it in the file. Most municipalities, I'm not even taking that to the board level. We're kind of making that policy call at a administrative level. So yeah, I certainly have no problems with that.
And I appreciate
technically,
Nate, I appreciate Nate's view on that, and I wish that was the same view. But in this instance, when we're talking about small projects and not subdivision and land development, the consultant who is advising us is Cedarville, and Cedarville does not hold the view that Nate just expressed.
They're taking a strict interpretation of it, which is fair. I mean, that's what the code technically says.
What about if the new location has different slopes and things like that?
If it goes in different directions or something like that, that's where it becomes problematic.
But what you're saying, Luke, and I think Nate, is you apply for the waiver and the board discusses it, right?
Right. There's a way to get to the answer that you want, the applicant wants, and that the management team wants, and that what Nate is describing. I'm trying to be respectful of Cedarville's interpretation, which is that's not what the law says.
Well, I understand Cedarville, but 90% of the phone calls that I get are because it's taking so long for, not necessarily Cedarville, it could be any engineer. And the residents are saying, hey, it's been 6 months, where am I? And we say, we're waiting on our Stormwater Management Council. And unfortunately, I mean, I guess the argument could be made is, look at the last 6 months. Interest rates just rose 3 points. So the difference of 6 months is the difference of possibly thousands of dollars on a project. So if it's something that the board can say, yeah, we see this, you took a swimming pool out, now you want to do the same size patio, A to B, and we can find no argument otherwise, and then it should be a waiver request. If it's something that was taken out 15, 20 years ago, totally different story. I don't agree.
Okay, so.
That's gonna be a long ordinance to have all these different exceptions.
I don't mind going to Cedarville and say, look, we had a discussion in a public meeting, and what is in the ordinance is that the board can grant waivers if it meets the spirit of the stormwater ordinance. And I'm telling you right now, when someone is substituting impervious in one location to another, the board is inclined to grant that waiver, and we can just maybe skip each one of them coming to you.
That's exactly right, because it's jamming up our, I mean, I'm sure you've gotten phone calls about, I mean, we just dealt with one in the swimming pool up at Hideaway. So it's a never-ending stormwater issue, not to mention the ones I get about when, why do I have to do it? Why do I have to sign, stormwater is obviously a big one, but if it's one less thing that we can alleviate from our inbox, then I would be in favor of obviously, going down that direction. Are you guys okay with doing, the availability of doing a waiver if we can agree on it?
Yeah, I just think we're going down a road where it's gonna be difficult, because people are going, if we give a waiver to one for a certain reason, and then somebody comes up that's close, but there's a different reason, and we don't give a waiver. Consistency. I mean, we just passed that new stormwater ordinance that is 2.5 inches thick.
Yeah, it ends up being on.
Why don't we just do away with stormwater?
Oh, there you go. Put me out of a job, Paul.
You have my vote, and unfortunately, it isn't an option available to us.
So I'm okay with anything that makes it easier for the township residents without overburdening staff or
And
supervisors.
I'm not saying that a month is an unreasonable time to wait on something, but 6 months because of stormwater for something, if you have an argument, you so that they don't have to come to the board every time, and that's all. That's my point. All right, well, you have that residents' email exchange. Can you explain to them the option of the waiver, at least we can knock one off the books? Yes, absolutely.
As a resident who lives next door to a house that was built about 10 years ago.
Danny, sorry, do you mind just coming up to the podium? Sorry, just because the homeowner is viewing at home.
There's a house on North Bailey Road that sits at an angle behind me. That house has it was built with no stormwater controls, and it has flooded my property. What used to be a dry shed is now a wet shed. I can't keep certain pieces of equipment in there. So while I understand looking at the residents' problems with stormwater management, you need to look at a little bit broader picture as who that water is going to affect, if in fact it isn't in there. I mean, there has to be a plan.
No, and I think that's a very valid point. I would say, why not also consider it to be something like what we do when a developer wants to put a development in? You have to go to so many residents within a certain proximity.
I get it. There's no easy decision, but I mean, there is
wouldn't-
an impact on nearby residents.
If we grant a waiver, it's only because the water isn't, we come to the conclusion the water isn't going to leave the property.
Right, and in this particular case,
So
I
if it's going to
believe-
leave the property, then they're going to have to do stormwater.
Yeah, and in this particular situation, I believe this resident already has stormwater on their property because they had an addition built before they bought it, which I believe was during stormwater management time. Could be wrong, but I'm just throwing that out there as well. So obviously, they're all going to be different case by case.
I mean, did I miss something? We're not going to be given waivers of the water.
Oh, no.
Leave the property, okay.
But that's exactly what Cedarville will reply. Cedarville will say, the concern with substituting one area of impervious for another is, one, we don't know that they properly decommissioned they tore up the concrete pad, but how do we know that that soil percolates in a way of pre-development? That's one thing. Number two is, although you tore up the concrete pad and you built a different concrete pad elsewhere, the water is going to a different location on that site. And now, instead of flowing to the east side, it flows to the west side. And neighbors like Sandy are now experiencing water.
Well, then we're not going to give them a waiver.
Right, that's where it's a case-by-case basis, you have to evaluate and
So,
make a determination.
exactly. So I can't simultaneously assure the resident that they'll be getting a waiver and then also know that it's a case-by-case
Applying
basis.
for a waiver.
Okay, very good. I will advise them to apply for a waiver.
I mean, I have so many neighbors whose water drains onto my property, it goes east, west, north, and south, so
Right.
And
But understand, that is exactly what Cedarville's concern is when they say this is not meeting the ordinance.
Yep. And again, by applying for a waiver, if the resident were to come into a Board of Supervisors meeting and they were to bring their own engineer in and say, this is why this is not gonna be a problem, and then obviously we can prove it much faster with our engineer in-house versus the 6 months for our engineer to give it back to their engineer, and then their engineer says, well, we can do it, this is why we can do it, and so on and so forth. It's just.
Right. And it's also important to note that there's a difference between being told the answer is no and then time passing, as opposed to having a submission in place
In limbo.
and waiting on a response.
Yeah, and I think that that's what the situation is right now.
With all due respect, I don't think that's the situation.
I
I think
think
the
that-
situation is, you're being, the applicant, as sympathetic as I am, is being told no and they don't like the answer.
I don't know.
Which is different than staff is ignoring my
Right,
request.
right.
You just been told no and you don't like it, which is different than we're not doing our homework.
Understood.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Anybody else for non-agenda items? I don't think so. Okay, so just notice an executive session will be held following this meeting, the conclusion of this meeting, to discuss personnel and legal matters. Do I have
Move we adjourn.
a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.